This is Bill Rogers. By all rules, regulations, indications, and my own admission, after 20 years of continuous and rather steady drinking, I am qualified to say that I'm an alcoholic. From as far back in childhood as I can remember, I have seen and experienced drinking to excess in my home.
Bill Rogers, an alcoholic, lives in Santa Barbara, California, where the people act. The people act. These are true stories, tape recorded in communities across the nation where people are working together to build a better future. The People Act is presented by the TV Radio Workshop, established by the Ford Foundation, and produced by the CBS Radio Network. Sound is real. No actors are used. Now, here again is your narrator, the noted reporter, Robert Trout. We're on State Street in Santa Barbara, California. It's a little past midnight. That's the Black Maria, the paddy wagon. The cops are out to pick up Bill Rogers again. Seems he's on another bender.
All right, Bill, come on. Drag your feet there. Straighten up a little bit. Straighten up a little bit, Bill. All right, in here, Bill.
Bill's really drunk this time. Quite a crowd has assembled to watch the cops take him away. The crowd finds a drunk like Bill pretty funny.
Well, Sergeant, here's Bill Rogers again. Get up here, Bill. Come on, up the booking desk here.
Where did you pick him up at, Sergeant?
Oh, State and Yananelli, same old place. Passed out there on the sidewalk.
What are you going to book him at, Sergeant?
Well, common drunk. He's been in here so many times here. We're going to have to take care of him for good this time. Get him up to county jail a few days. I think we'll get him dried out and do him good.
So Bill Rogers is back in the station house again. It happens all the time. Maybe some people think Bill's funny, but not the people who really know him, like the bartenders.
Well, Bill, this friend of everybody that comes into our bar, was one of the nicest fellows you ever wanted to meet until he had a few drinks too many. Then he became obnoxious, tried to pick a fight with everybody because they disagreed with him on any subject he wanted to bring up. After a certain point, well, we would call a cab, and of course, all of his drinks he was putting on the cuff. He never seemed to have any money, and we would call a cab and send him home in a taxi cab, which we would have to pay for out of our own pockets because we knew that his wife didn't have the money at home and he couldn't even afford to go out and spend what little money he was spending.
Bill Rogers' landlord is not laughing either.
About 2 years ago, Bill and his wife Ann came to me and wanted to rent an apartment. They seemed a very nice couple, so I decided to let them have my garage apartment, which is right in back of my house. Well, things went along fine till Bill started drinking more and more. And the neighbors started complaining because Bill was making all sorts of noise and the place was unsightly in the back. And I'm ordinarily an understanding man. But finally things got so bad and Bill got so far behind in his rent that I just had to take things in my hand and kick Bill out. I never hated to do anything worse in my life.
And Bill Rogers' wife, Ann, is far from amused.
We found that our lives were unmanageable in several different ways. Bill, of course, lost one job after another, and about this time I decided I was the one that would have to take the full responsibility and make the living. Of course, this gave Bill a wonderful chance to keep on drinking because I would be gone all day and he would have the opportunity of being drunk in the house without anyone interfering with his drinking.
Booking information, Sergeant. Take him on in the jail.
Okay, guess we'll have to put you away. Come on. Here's the old drunk tank. All right, down in there. Take it easy now. I'll see you after a while. Here you go.
So Bill Rogers is back in the drunk tank. And that's about all the future he could look forward to. Jail and the long slide down Skid Row. If it hadn't been for a dinner party at the home of Mrs. Warren Tremaine a couple of years ago. One of the guests was Mrs. Marty Mann, the National Director of the Committee for Education on Alcoholism. During the dinner, she got to talking about her work.
We feel that this problem actually is too big to be handled on a national scale. So the National Committee, right in the beginning, felt that the way to approach it was through local committees. You people, I know, would like to know a little bit about what a local committee is. If it's going to do a job in a community, it's got to represent every group that makes up a community. And its primary job is educational because, of course, what we're aiming for is prevention in the end, as well as rehabilitation, and that requires teaching the community a new attitude toward the problem of alcoholism.
One of the guests at that dinner was Al Weingand, who operates the San Isidro Ranch. He called in a small group of friends who he thought might be interested, and they made plans to form a Santa Barbara Committee on Alcoholism.
We knew that there would be a big job to be done to overcome the age-old prejudice about alcoholism, the matter of stigma, and hiding this vast problem. And we set out to undertake an educational and informational program to bring modern concepts about this disease to the community.
The committee sets up an information center, mimeographs pamphlets, gets publicity in the newspapers, raises money, gets doctors, welfare workers, the courts and police, and members of Alcoholics Anonymous to work with them. They organize a speakers bureau and go on the air for a series of 11 radio broadcasts.
There are more than 3,750,000 people in the United States who repeatedly are in trouble because of their excess use of alcohol. In them, alcoholism is a disease, calling for medical, psychiatric, and social help.
They try to reach everybody in the community, young and old. Dr. John McCall speaks at a special meeting of the Santa Barbara Ventura Interschool Council.
Dr. McCall, I'm Fritz Benning from Santa Barbara. I have a question for you. What are the present medical cures for alcoholism?
Fritz, there is no medical cure for alcoholism. It amounts to an arrestment rather than a cure. But we find, in working with our committee, that there are ways and means of arresting this disease.
Do you think that any alcoholics could have been prevented by becoming so, by having education before?
You might say it is the greatest influence in not becoming an alcoholic. And it has been my aim, and the aim of this committee, to get this particular subject before the younger generation and acting as a prevention rather than a cure.
Santa Barbara begins to become conscious of alcoholism, of what it is, of the problems. People hear the speeches, begin to get over their shame, begin to go to the information center. One of the first is Bill Rogers' wife, Ann. She's interviewed by the director of the center, Mrs. Lillian Power.
Do you want to tell me about your problem, and we'll see what we can work out?
As you probably know, it's a drinking problem. My husband is in jail. I have tried many times, Mrs. Power, to do something for him, and I'm just at my wit's ends.
First, let me tell you, don't be discouraged. I know this seems to be a very difficult situation for you, but we can help you to understand alcoholism. What we'd like to do with you is tell you how to handle the alcoholic. You can do some reading. Here we have all sorts of books and literature. You must learn as much about alcoholism as you possibly can in order to help your husband.
I was wondering if I could get my husband to somebody that knows about this organization.
Yes, you can. We can call in a man, Mr. Free over at the Mental Hygiene Clinic, and arrange for your husband's treatment and have him come over there for a therapy group that he has.
I just haven't any money for expensive treatments. How about this Mr. Free? What is his fee for this sort of thing?
Well, they operate over there on a sliding scale. The doctors, the psychiatrists, and Mr. Free give their time over there. It's a voluntary service. Of course, if you can pay, you do pay, but if not, why, they'll be very happy to help you, so don't hesitate about that at all.
Ann Rogers goes home with a handful of pamphlets to read. For the first time, she feels there's a place she can turn to for help. Meanwhile, Mrs. Mary Young, the center's social worker, is down at the jail looking into Bill's record. Then she consults Dr. Charles Pruce, the center's psychiatric advisor.
Dr. Pruce, I have come to see you about Bill Rogers. Mrs. Rogers wants to know what she can do. What shall I tell her?
Well, Mrs. Young, I've already heard something about the case, and it looks to me that Mr. Rogers is a pretty sick man. I understand he's at the jail now, and my advice to you is that he should be sent out to psychopathic hospital. While he's out there, and that period could be all the way from 10 days to 2 weeks, he's given treatment both for his physical condition and his mental condition. And at the hearing, the Board of Medical Examiners will go over the case as thoroughly as they can, and they will recommend to the judge whether he should be sent to the state hospital or sent out of this hospital on a continuance basis.
Bill Rogers is transferred from the drunk tank to the county hospital. Margaret Power is the nurse in charge of his ward.
I'll never forget how Mr. Rogers looked when he came in. He was just, well, of course, he hadn't shaved for days, and he was very unclean, and he'd been vomiting, of course. And, it was, well, it isn't a job that you relish because it's so unclean, and his language was very abusive and offending. He didn't look like anything that you want to spend any time with.
Ann Rogers visits Bill. She's never seen him so low. She's very worried. She goes to the mental hygiene clinic, talks to James Free, who heads the alcoholism section.
My husband, Bill Rogers, has been in jail, and, right now he's at the Santa Barbara County Hospital, and he must have help when he gets out of there.
Do you feel that he's reached the point that he realizes he has a serious problem? Do you think he wants help?
I feel like now would be the proper time for him to receive some kind of help. Should I do anything towards getting my husband here, or is that something that you could control?
Well, it depends a great deal on him. Most alcoholics are magnificently stubborn. And as you know, if you're married to one, often a wife is the last person that he's very willing to take suggestions from. So that I would suggest that you try to be quite tactful in just suggesting to him that there is professional help available here at the clinic for him, and see if he won't come here of his own accord. It would be much better that way.
Ann is nervous as she faces her husband. She knows how much this can mean to them. She has to handle this right. She follows James Free's advice, and Bill agrees. Haggard and jittery, Bill Rogers leaves the hospital, goes to the clinic, listens to what James Free tells him.
Here's the thing that might interest you, Mr. Rogers. Dr. Jelinek, who was the first head of the Yale group studying alcohol problems and was first head of the Yale Summer School of Alcohol Studies, has worked out this thing that I'm going to just read through quickly for you, which are the symptoms of the progressive disease of alcoholism, as he calls it. And it starts with the time that you draw your first blank. And that is followed by sneaking drinks, wondering whether you'll get enough to drink, gulping drinks, being evasive about your drinking, about how much you had to drink the night before, and then followed by one or more additional times of drawing blank. And that makes the first phase of the disease alcoholism. And Dr. Jelinek made the statement that anyone who has shown those symptoms is an alcoholic, and that he can never then go back to social drinking or controlled drinking.
Do you mean to tell me, Mr. Free, that if I've got any of those symptoms, that it's a foregone conclusion that I'm an alcoholic?
Did you ever draw a blank?
Well, yes.
Mm-hmm. Did you have you sneak drinks? Did you catch a
yes.
quick one?
To tell you the truth, Mr. Free, you went through them rather hurriedly, but I've done all those things. I didn't realize what I was up against.
Well, that's fine. If you realize it, that's the big hurdle. If you come to realize that you do have a disease, that you are sick, that you can't control this, and that you never can drink.
Never again, no matter how long I lay off of it?
There's as far as I know, nobody has confirmed a case of a real alcoholic who has lost control and who has successfully, over any long period of time, gone back to social drinking.
After Bill leaves, Mr. Free goes over his record with the clinic psychiatrist. There are 4 possible courses. They can send him to the state hospital, treat him at the clinic, send him to a private doctor, or put Alcoholics Anonymous in touch with him. Because Bill shows signs of understanding and facing his problem, they decide on the last course. James Free calls an AA member he knows, and the next day the AA member shows up at Bill Rogers' house.
I'm glad to have you here.
Well, tell me about it. What's the difficulty?
After several years of drinking, I've found myself in a position where I just can't do anything more. I know that I have to quit drinking, and I don't know what to do about it.
I was in exactly the same spot several years ago.
You?
Yes.
Holy smoke, I wouldn't believe that looking at you. And you got what you've got now through AA?
Through AA.
I'm a little lost, Jim. What do you do with your time? I've got a fear that, I've drunk so long, what'll I do without it?
You'll be surprised. I had the same fear. I didn't know what I was going to do to fill in my time, and now I don't have time to do the things that I'd like to do.
Yeah?
And it's fun being sober.
Well, you certainly look like it.
It's a wonderful sensation.
I've been sober for a short period of time, but I've never been happy about it.
You will be on AA.
Well, by golly, that's what I want.
Ann Rogers goes with Bill to his first AA meeting. They find out that the members know each other only by their first names. They hear the chairman, Bob, read the 12 steps for recovery in the AA program, a summation of their spiritual approach to the problem of alcoholism. Then a man named Paul gets up to speak.
Well, as somebody said, my name's Paul, and I suffer from this disease of alcoholism with a slight touch of obesity, in case you hadn't noticed it. Let me say that the reason that we tell our stories is not particularly to entertain, although some of it is a little humorous maybe, and not to dramatize ourselves. Somewheres in the audience we are ever hopeful that there might be somebody who is wondering whether or not he or she is an alcoholic, and our pattern of drinking might be something like theirs. And they will say, oh, yes, I went through just that. I guess maybe I better look into this thing. That's why we give these histories. I failed in business. And, of course, there was one escape. The bottle, you see. There I was, a hypocritical, liquor-stealing, lying, dishonest, drunk. You can't go any lower. And I'd begun to recognize it back in here then. And I'd begun to try to do something about it. But nothing worked. And those 4 years in Chicago, folks, were 4 years of hell. Just hell. So I came to New York to find a home. It happened. There, I had my last 2 weeks binge. A horrible binge. And the night before, my wife was to join me to set up housekeeping in this theoretical house. On the 14th floor of the Hotel Statler, I opened the window, and it was open all night, and I spent the night trying to get my courage up to jump out, because I'd wrecked it again. Well, I didn't. Anyway, the net is this to me. It seems to me that I am the happiest man in the world. It all couldn't be if it hadn't been for AA. It's just through AA that this has all been possible. And thank you for listening to me, and thank you all AAs everywhere.
After the meeting, at home, Ann waits tensely to find out how Bill has reacted to what he's seen and heard. Finally, she asks him.
Well, Bill, what did you think about the meeting?
Well, honey, I will say this, that I was never so surprised in all my life. When I walked into that room, and saw over 100 people, most of them supposedly alcoholics, that to see the happiness on their face, their smiles, and they were enjoying the meeting. The whole thing certainly impressed me, honey. There might be something there for me.
Well, I don't want to push you, Bill. I've done enough of that, but I certainly would like to give this a try. I think it'd be good for both of us.
Well, I'm certainly willing. I think from everything I've seen so far that we're on the right track, honey.
Ann Rogers knows about Bill's good intentions. She's heard him talk like that 1,000 times before. But this time, there's a difference.
Bill did go back to the meetings. In fact, he kept on going. This made a wonderful difference in our home. We were able to have friends in our home. This was a new experience for me. In the past, I've always hesitated to invite friends into our home because the night or the day would come around when they were expected, and of course Bill would be drunk. But all this was changed now.
We leave Bill Rogers, not in a gutter on State Street, in a new house, in a good job, cold sober. We go back to the information center, watch other Bill Rogers come in, other alcoholics. We see them turned in a new direction by an interested, enlightened community. Most of the people in Santa Barbara are pleased with the job they have done, but only a few of them, like Bill Rogers, can fully know what it means.
Today, after having been sober on the AA program for approximately 3 years, I can wake up in the morning without that fear. I like to see the sun coming up. I'm taking active part in community affairs. I'm enjoying myself for the first time since my childhood days. I feel for the first time in my life that I'm free, that I have an opportunity for happiness rather than the fear that I carried for so many years, and depending on the bottle. In short, with me, it's just like being freed from slavery.
You have just heard The People Act, narrated by Robert Trout, a documentary series presented by the TV Radio Workshop established by the Ford Foundation and produced by the CBS Radio Network. These programs are under the sponsorship of the National Committee for the People Act. Here is the committee's director, Elmore McKee.
The citizens of Santa Barbara have dealt forthrightly with the problem of alcoholism. If you would like further information, won't you write us at the People Act Center, State College, Pennsylvania, and we will try to put you in touch with someone in your vicinity qualified to consult with you. And if you wish a script or a record of today's program, please write us at the People Act Center, State College, Pennsylvania.
The People Act is produced by Irving Gitman, edited by Fred Freed. Tape recordings were made in Santa Barbara, California, by reporters Dave Moore and Louis Spence. Next week, the story of how the youth of Alexandria, Minnesota, awakened their parents to their needs.